Before I get into the white pill or the white option, the big key here is to wake up. It is an awakening. The blue pill is a rejection of the truth out of ego, out of a closed mindset, out of fear of what you could really be. The rejection of the blue pill over the red pill still keeps you equally enslaved. You're just two very different parts of the ladder. Now, it's very easy for me to say to you, reject money, reject wealth, right? Reject the world. But I do not believe that the world is inherently a bad place. I believe that the world is equal parts joyous, vindictive, beautiful, ugly, challenging, easy. It's all these things and so much more. But you don't see that unless you've actually taken part in it. To reject what you've never experienced leaves you open and vulnerable. To reject that what you know is like understanding an animal. If you know the animal, you know what tricks it will pull. If you know the animal, you'll know what tricks it'll pull to try and trick you, and you can prepare for them. I've told you this before, but I'll repeat it again. I want you to get everything you want in life. I want you to engage in the world. I want you to seek pleasure and joy in the world outside of yourself. I want you to accumulate money. I want you to engage in pleasure-seeking behaviours. I want you to, get on your phone and get on Instagram and Facebook and all these different things. I want you to do that. Why? Why do I want you to do that? Because eventually you will realise that there is nothing in the world that will ever fulfill you totally. You will be hungry forever. You will chase forever. And you will chase that which is external from you. Now, the whole point of this video is that I want you to choose. If you want a life of constant chase, then choose it. Go all in. Risk it all. Enjoy the excitement and rack up the cash, the debt, the power. And then one day, someone hungrier than you will come by and eat you up too. Or worse, you'll meet someone like me who just doesn't care about the money and the power and the ego. Just doesn't care. And the reason why I don't care is because I'm playing an entirely different game. I'm playing my own game. So what is it that I'm offering you that's different? If you reject the game completely, and just FYI again, I don't think you should reject money. I don't think you should reject religion. I don't think you should reject education. I think you should understand what they mean. Understand what they are. Understand the game so that you can play your own game. I want you to re-educate yourself on truth. I want you to use money as a means of freeing yourself and those that you love and those that you care about from a life of object servitude, one way or the other. I want you to reject anyone who tells you that they can communicate to the divine, but you cannot. You can. You don't need someone else. And you can have a connection to a higher power, to the divine. I want you to use your imagination for good, to create your own story, craft your own life. If you can think of a system, then you can implement it. All of these systems are not inherently evil, and neither is having or owning money, or even taking care of your family, or going into education, re-educating. None of these things are evil or wrong. They're just energy. They're just energy. And how you use that energy defines you. I don't want you to waste your life. A wasted life is just as sad as a life spent in the pursuit of the material. Both of these paths are on the same ladder. You're still playing the same game. And they will both lead to disappointment. So what is my offer to you? I want you to lead a life that is active and conscious in the pursuit of your purpose. To be active is to be awake. You are an active participant in this life that you're crafting for yourself. To live a life in the pursuit of your purpose. That is to be directed. And finally, to live a conscious existence means to connect to the higher self. What does it mean to live an awake, directed life in that connection to that higher self? Well, firstly, it means that you are rejecting this ladder. Okay, you're rejecting this entirely. That's the first thing. It means that you are going to create your own game. That you are going to be an active participant in your own way of living and your own way of going about your life, whatever that means. Let's now go on to each one of these. What does it mean to be awake? In order to answer that question, I've got to introduce you to a number of authors and a number of concepts. One of which I've already introduced you to, which is the map of consciousness. The other two are Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson. Timothy Leary came up with what was called the 8-circuit model of consciousness, and it was a psycho-evolutionary framework. In order to understand what it means to be awake, I have to introduce you to a number of authors. The first of which is someone called Robert Anton Wilson. Robert Anton Wilson authored a few books. The most important one for me is this one called Prometheus Rising. Prometheus Rising utilises a concept called the 8-circuit model. The 8-circuit model was published in the 1970s by an author called Timothy Leary. The concept is that we are, one, in bodies or beings which are in an evolutionary process, and secondly, we have a consciousness. And while we are simultaneously physical, we're also simultaneously spiritual. It's harder and harder and harder to deny that spiritual connection. And our human experience is changing. Now, that 8-circuit model of consciousness is both evolutionary and psychological. He describes circuits as reality tunnels. A reality tunnel is a way in which you view the world. So this is your tunnel, okay? This is how you view the world. Now, inside this tunnel might be a number of concepts, okay? There might be your family, money, just everything that's in this tunnel. Now, if something tries to get into this tunnel and you reject it, then guess what? That is an ego problem. You're rejecting a new concept or a new thought. Now, what Robert Anton Wilson, let's call him Raw for now, what Robert Anton Wilson was trying to get at with the 8 circuits in this book, the Prometheus Rising, he talks about the fastest way for a human being to reach enlightenment is to expand our reality tunnel, to incorporate new concepts, to incorporate new thoughts and ideas and positions of different people so that we can understand better. So this model conceptualized that the brain and the mind were running off of 8 circuits. So these were all interconnected together, and each one has different levels of awareness representing a stage in evolutionary development and personal growth. So these circuits aren't strictly anatomical, but more metaphysical, metaphorical. They're layers of neurological programming that process information, that shapes behaviour, and that filters our reality. So of these 8 circuits, the first 1, 2, 3, 4 are what we call terrestrial. And terrestrial basically means our world. So they are for survival and adaptation in the physical world. And these circuits are mainly imprinted. An imprint is you're basically stamped onto them in childhood. Now circuits 5, 6, 7, and 8 are post-terrestrial or extraterrestrial, meaning that they are outer world. To say that these processes are to prepare us for a life basically off planet. And these involve expanded states of consciousness, like creativity and unity. And you can reach these higher states via, guess what? Psychedelics, meditation, hemisync, and just all the things that I've already told you about. Now, this model surmises that most people are operating on these lower levels. They're operating on the primary lower circuits due to societal conditioning. And that means that they're able to lead a mechanical existence, mechanical robotic existence. So in order to awaken these higher circuits, it takes deliberate effort to reprint these 4 circuits to give way to higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of thinking. That you must reprogram your mind, fostering flexibility, optimism, and evolutionary potential. Now, what are these 8 circuits? I'm going to go through them with you now. So, the first circuit is the oral biosurvival circuit, and it's rooted in even single-celled organisms. Early vertebrates like fish-like ancestors. It corresponds with the reptilian brain or the brain stem in human neurobiology. It's all about survival and security, approach avoidance, fight or flight. And it's formed very much in infancy with oral experience, so nursing, dependency on a mother and a father. Positive imprints create trust and security, and negative imprints lead to paranoia, anxiety, addiction, or safety. Or an oral fixation if you're a Freudian. Now, the reality tunnel here, remember we're talking about reality tunnels, is a safe or unsafe. That's the filter. Okay? So a person at this level is someone who fundamentally feels very much unsafe in the world, or very safe in the world. Now, if you feel safe in the world and your immediate needs are met, then you get to transition to that second circuit. If you feel unsafe, you are going to react in different ways to stimuli. Anger, rage, fear, all kinds of different responses. But this is the first circuit. The second circuit is mammalian. So it's linked to the limbic system, or the emotional part of the brain. Or I call it dog brain. Right? You see this a lot in dogs. It's all about social hierarchy and emotional signalling. So this is where you can establish dominance, territory, emotional bonds. It handles power dynamics, status, group roles, submission or dominance in packs. Now, this is imprinted during being a toddler. It's imprinted when you are starting to venture out into the world, when you're trying to figure out how it works. You get to start to understand what authority figures are, parents, teachers. They shape this imprint. You either foster submissiveness or rebellion, egalitarian or... So an authoritarian imprint can foster submissiveness or rebellion, or an egalitarian one can imprint confidence. Now, someone who has this reality tunnel as a primary reality tunnel is about winners and losers. It's about hierarchy, up, down, winner, loser. So circuit 3 is dexterity and symbolic or symbolisms. Now, this was created during early hominids, basically us human beings. And it's all about that left hemisphere of the brain, or the neurocortex left hemisphere of the brain. It's about logic, it's about abstraction, it's about symbol manipulation, language, logic, tool making. It enables planning, reasoning, categorization, and it looks at world through maps, models, and words. Again, this is activated in childhood via education and language acquisition. So schooling and cultural norms imprint rigid thinking, binary logic, A or B. Right? It's about intellectual analysis, debate, invention. At this level, in your reality tunnel, it's all about map or territory. So map or territory. It's about abstracting things as labels. So you start to label things. Okay? And this is where your symbols override your direct experience. And then finally, you've got circuit 4. This is your socio-sexual or moral circuit. Now this is linked to civilized societies involving the right neocortex. That's for empathy and ethics, how we deal with other people. It's about social integration, morality, reproduction, role-playing in tribes and families, and it governs guilt, shame, and ethical codes to create group harmony. All about harmony. Okay? Behaviours here are parenting, mating rituals, conformity to taboos. Imbalances lead to repression, hypocrisy, or fanaticism, right? Moral crusades. Now, the moral filter here, Now, at this point, the reality tunnel, the main reality tunnel here, is good and bad. It's a moral filter. Now, I want you to see how the majority of people are operating consistently at these 4 levels. People are aware they're either safe or unsafe. People are aware that they're where they are in a hierarchy. People are aware of what something is. If I say this is a phone, then you have lots of ideas what a phone is. It's a label for what this is. Or blue or red. And then finally have a moral filter. What's right and what's wrong. Most people are operating within these 4 circuits only. And when there is dysfunction within each one of these, well, we must ascend and work on those issues. You can also see here that this fits quite well with the life stages of growth. This one is baby, toddler, child, and adult. Which means that the other 4 circuits, 5, 6, 7, and 8, well, they go beyond our biology. Because remember, this isn't just about our biology, it's also about that spiritual side of things. We're simultaneously physical, biological beings, leading physical, biological lives, while also having a connection with something greater than ourselves. And our ability to tap into that directly affects the outcome of our life. So what are the other 4 circuits, these higher circuits? So circuit 5 is the neurosomatic or hedonic circuit. Now, this is when you go beyond survival. Remember, the first 4 circuits were all about survival. This is all about flow. When you enter into a flow state, you have no care, no concern about your physical existence. It's all about your creativity and the mind and body unity. So what does that mean? It means that when you enter a flow state, when you've got no concerns of those lower levels, you enter into this sort of peak or a higher state. And that higher state can be when you're actively engaged with something that fulfills you. Or you can have an artistic flow. Or you have a what we call a peak experience. A peak experience is something where you genuinely just feel so intoxicated with endorphins. Oh, this is just amazing, an amazing feeling. Right? It's where life becomes a source of constant joy, not just utility. You're not just going about the motions, getting more cash and more money. No, there's this connection, this joy, and it feels great. And again, you can get this when your physical needs are fulfilled, your basic physical needs are fulfilled, and you can get it by meditation, breath work. Even sensory deprivation can do it as well. Like low doses of psychedelics can do this too. So that is C5. So at circuit 6, this is where we come into the collective unconscious. So in my previous videos, I've talked about that information field and getting access to that. Well, this is the start of that process. It's drawing on your ability to access memories and events and information that you wouldn't necessarily have access to. Now, this model talks about it as basically DNA memory. There's memory within the DNA. There's genetic archives that you can have access to. And that comes in the form of intuition. Now, the reality tunnel here is about pattern seeking. Patterns through history. You start to see archetypes. And you start to pierce the veil. You start to understand that it's not just our physical plane. It's about something else is going on. And as you move into this state, you can get into here by heavy doses of psychedelics, deep meditation, near-death experiences. You begin to get visions. If you're living at this level, you start to get synchronicities. Artists and prophets typically operate at around this level of C5 and C6. Now, C7 and C8, they're harder for me to explain to you. Now, the reason why it's hard for me to explain them to you is because I haven't necessarily personally experienced these circuits before. So I can only go off of what I've read and what other people have told me. So C7, that is all about what they call neuroelectric. That basically means that you have what's called a meta level awareness. So you effectively become aware of all the things that's happened in your life and previous lives of your family, and your brain can start self-hacking. So it can hack itself and start reprogramming itself. It can observe and stay separated on lower circuits. And again, you can get here by really advanced meditation, high doses of psychedelics. It's about detaching from the ego. So you can have basically ego death at this point. And you start to not only know, but understand that reality really is a construct. Now, circuit 8 is what he calls the non-local quantum circuit, right, or the overmind. This is effectively oneness. Total connection to the one, an ego death complete, and you're able to unify with everything, that infinite intelligence. Now, I have mentioned an infinite intelligence before. I've mentioned your mind, your brain, and that your mind is your brain and your body. That gets to access this information field, and beyond this, the information field, there is the one. That one being, which is the all. Right? That is that level. I have no experience really with these levels, but it's important for you to know what they are. And the reason why it's important for you to know what they are is because the next person I want to introduce you to is someone called Georgy Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff is one of, in my view, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century when it comes down to a spiritual life or a purposeful, awakened existence. He came up with a worldview which combined both Eastern mysticism and Eastern ways in which to come to enlightenment, and combined it for a Western audience. And he brought it back to Europe after 20 odd years worth of travel and experience. Gurdjieff coined what was called the fourth way. But in order to understand what the fourth way is, you first need to understand what the previous three ways are. They are the way of the fakir, the way of the yogi, and the way of the monk. The way of the fakir is the way of the body. So what a fakir would do is that they would do... Oh my god, looks like a penis. What a fakir would do is that they would do immense feats of willpower. You know, they would hold up their arm for months, years, in fact, and they would never let it down. They had intense physical mastery, and they worked on the body. Then you have the monk. The monk put themselves in isolated communities, and they worked on the emotions. Because a monk wanted to find enlightenment via faith, via devotion. They would ask every single day, God, what do I need to do? Show me what I need to do. And they'd go out their day trying to centre themselves on those emotions, demonstrating their faith through prayer, through ritual, and a communal religious life. Once you became a monk, there's no more going out. You're a monk for life. And they cultivated the emotional centre, or the feeling. And finally, you have the yogi. The yogi emphasises the mind, knowledge, and they used meditation and study as a way to grow the intellect. These are the previous three ways. Now, what are the problem with these three ways? Well, obviously, each one focuses on a particular area. The fakir focuses on the body, the yogi on the mind, and the monk on the emotions. But let's say if you're a fakir, then you have reached enlightenment. Well, now what? You've got no idea what it is that you are receiving, what enlightenment that you can give to others, because you've got no idea, really, how that interacts with the world. If you're a monk, great. You've reached spiritual enlightenment, but you can't share it with anybody. You live a life of total devotion in a very small conclave of other monks. So you can't share it with anybody. And also, you've got no real connection with the outside world. So how is it going to be of any use? How is it going to help anybody else? It won't. And finally, you have the yogi. Yes, a yogi would be very intelligent, but how are they going to actually interact with the world when they've got no experience of the physical and they've got no experience of the emotional? They still might overreact. They still might react to things poorly, negatively. So each one of these focuses on one centre over the others, one area of the others. Sometimes, by the way, if a yogi recognises that a fakir has achieved enlightenment, say, early, then they will bring them in as a yogi and also teach them about intelligence. So they'll be able to go out into the world and start talking about what it is that they're able to do. By the way, how fakirs did these extreme acts of physical might, is that even they don't know how they did it. They joined these fakir groups, which they went under intense hypnosis, intense sort of unconscious reprogramming, and even they don't understand how they do it. They just understand it's what they do. So when a fakir reaches that enlightenment state, the yogi then improves their intelligence. They can understand why they're able to do it or how they've been able to do it. So these are the traditional ways. Now, what Gurdjieff did is that he took these three traditional ways, the way of the body, the way of the way of the mind, and the way of the emotion, and he created a fourth way. And that was the development of these three centres simultaneously. It's also called the way of the sly man. Now, a sly man is someone who, for some reason, shouldn't have access to this information, shouldn't have access to this knowledge. They get it from maybe a book they picked up, or maybe it was handed down to them, or maybe they stole it from someone else. That's what it means to be a sly man. And Gurdjieff certainly was a character. He led a fascinating life, a truly fascinating life. And no doubt about it, he went on to create a spiritual system which has enabled many people to reach a state of enlightenment. Now, what is then the fourth way? Well, we know it's about combining these three centres together. But what is a centre? A really great analogy for this is, let's say that you enter into a house with lots and lots of doors. And behind each one of these doors is a room. Now, let's say that you have a key for one of these rooms. Okay? But as you enter the room, there is a large chest. Okay? It's a large chest. Now, if you don't have a key to this chest, then what's the point in entering the room? Or let's say that you try and enter into one of the rooms, but you don't have the key for the room, but you have the key for the chest. Or let's say that you have the key for the chest and you have the key for the room. But once you open the box, you've got absolutely no idea what is inside it or how to interpret what is inside of it. It's only when that you have both keys and the knowledge and the insight to understand what's in the box that you can actually get something out of the experience. That is the fundamental principle of the fourth way, that you must work on all three centres at the same time so that you may enter the room, open the box, and understand what's in it. But now we've gone over that, what actually is a centre? Well, a centre is quite metaphorical. It's not actually something physical in the body. You can't find them if you looked for them. But there are two other, what we call lower centres. There's mind, body, emotion. There is sexual, and then there is instinctive. We all know that mind, body, and emotions are. The sexual centre is our reproduction, and the instinctive centre is our automatic biological processes. Heartbeat, digestion, breathing, temperature regulation, the five senses. That's what they are. Okay? So, the first principle for Gurdjieff is that each one of these centres, well, we have a preference for each one of these centres. So, if you have a body preference, you're going to be really great at sport. If you have a mind preference, you're going to be really great at learning and developing. If you have an emotional preference, then you're going to feel very, very deeply about all kinds of different things. So each one of these centres, if it needs to be developed, it requires something different. The other thing that Gurdjieff introduced within his system is a process called self-remembering. Self-remembering is the process of staying conscious, staying awake within these centres. So just try it. When you're going about your day, just try and stay present with yourself. Try not to lose yourself in the moment. Try not to lose yourself when you're going about and doing something. Just try and stay focused. Try and stay centred. And you'll find it is really, really difficult. It's really hard. But self-remembering is the start. Because once you're able to self-remember, you're able to understand what each one of these centres does, how it controls you, what preferences it has, where you move to when you have a problem. Now, he called these 5 centres lower, the lower centres. Now, the reason why he described them as lower centres is because for ordinary people, while we are operating within them, we're totally unaware of how they're operating. In fact, more often than not, they operate in disharmony. And if the centres are in disharmony and we're not aware of how they're operating, then he described that as mechanical. But if you are modern day, you'd be an NPC or a robot. So if we bring this together, it means that in order for you to harmonise these centres, it means that you stop being an NPC or a robot. But the majority of people are mechanical. They live life mechanically. They live life in such a way where they have no idea what it is that they're doing or why they're doing it. Now, until we're able to harmonise these centres, we're never going to ascend to higher levels of consciousness. Now, Gurdjieff mentioned 2 other higher centres, and they are the higher emotional and the higher intellectual. And once again, these 2 centres described by Gurdjieff are all about going beyond. They're about going to the divine, they're about experiencing oneness, much like what was talked about with those circuits in the circuits model. Exactly the same thing. Let me give you a quick little analogy on these centres so that you can get a clear understanding of how they work and how they function. Let's say that you go into an old stately home. Okay, you go into that old stately home, and in an old stately home, you've of course got servants. Sadly, these servants aren't quite in the right places. You've got the maid. She's in the garden. Tends to the garden. You've got the gardener. And he's tending to the horses in the stables. You've also got the cook. And the cook, well, weirdly, the cook is out polishing the staircase. So all these people are working, but they're working in completely the wrong places, not suited for their roles. So the first thing we need to do is we need to put these people in the right place. The maid needs to be on the staircase so she can polish the stairs. The gardener needs to be in the garden. The cook needs to be in the kitchen. These people need to be aligned, moved, and they must stay there. And eventually, over time, when all these people are in the right place, a head butler will appear, or will be elected. Now, that head butler basically means one of these centres will be determined to be the one which will have the most power, the most control. Now, over time, after this head butler has kept everyone there, kept everyone working in this house, sooner or later, the master will appear. Now, if I was to turn this into psychological babble, the head butler is when you stop doing all this work intentionally, creating great effort. It moves into subconscious, it moves into habit. The head butler is basically a habituation, creating habits. The master is our higher self. Because the master will decide what the house is for. What is the purpose of the household? Yes, it's serving the master, but what is the purpose of the household? How is it going to serve the master? How is the higher self going to restructure the home for a greater purpose? So until you're able to get to this master, you really live effectively a purposeless life. That is what Gurdjieff was saying. Until you're able to align these centers, you're going to remain a robot. You're going to remain unconscious. I'll tell you a quick personal story. I drive, and for the longest time I would get so annoyed and so irritated by people when they cut me up or when they, turn without indicating, all these different things. And when I started to get into Gurdjieff, I stopped getting emotional about it. I stopped reacting. So I recognised that, number one, I was simply reacting robotically, mechanically to a stimulus, which was silly. And number two, that person in the car was also being mechanical. They were just continuing to go about their day without thinking about it too. So we were both mechanically reacting to one another via these centres which neither one of us had any real control over. So now whenever that happens to me, I laugh. I let it go. Because in that moment, I get to choose whether I become awake and conscious of what is actually happening. And that's what I choose to do. I become awake, I become aware of what's actually happening. And I try my best to self-remember. Self-remembering is hard. It's really hard. Sometimes I'll go a couple of days without remembering myself. Other times, I can go, hours and hours and hours on end within that mode of consciousness, with, staying present and still within myself. But it's hard. It's really difficult. And it's a lifetime of practice to get that quite right. To get that as you need it. So just to be clear, the way that you can reach these higher centres is by self-remembering and elevating these lower centres and harmonising them within the body. And harmonising them. The only way you can harmonise them is by self-remembering and observation. By spending lots of time doing that, you can reach a harmonised, real being. No longer mechanical, but it takes time, a lot of time. Hopefully, you can see the similarity between this Gurdjieff's model of consciousness, Gurdjieff's model of being awake, and the 8-circuit model. It's 7 centres rather than 8 circuits, but you can see the similarity. Now, there's one last author I want to introduce you to, and this is someone you've met before. It is Dr. Hawkins. I've spoke about power versus force. I've spoke about the map of consciousness already in depth, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But just to go into it really quickly, these lower levels of emotional states keep you here. These higher levels help move you up. Once again, this is all about the lower centers, the lower circuits, staying at that point, not enabling yourself to stay still and to think. And this is all about moving past those lower centers, those lower circuits. Hawkins, for me, took both of those systems and put in the missing piece. He took Gurdjieff, he took Leary, he put them together and he gave the missing piece as the map of consciousness. It's by moving these emotional states, staying still, being with ourselves, that enables us to move up, to awaken properly. Because what we're trying to do is to awaken. We must awaken. We must awaken. We must take effort in our ability to wake up. If we don't become, if we don't observe ourselves, if we don't take part in self-remembering, then we're going to be in a constant mechanical or robotic state and we'll have no idea why. So we must do it. That is the model of awakening. Okay? How to stay awake. And I've gave you 3 different models there. You take your favourite one. Personally, I like Gurdjieff. I think the 8 circuits is really cool, but I tend to use it less. And then the map of consciousness I use pretty much every single day. But that is how to awaken. Now, what about purpose? How do you find your purpose? There's 3 ways you can find your purpose. First way, childhood. Look back at your childhood and see what you enjoyed. I loved learning. For some reason, I just enjoyed finding out truths and secrets of the world that really excited me. It still excites me now. It's why I'm so focused on understanding the human condition and going deep, deep, deep within it and exploring all these different realms of possibility and trying to map it in a way that makes sense. Because that makes me incredibly happy. And I've been doing that since I was little, understanding the world. Why is it the way it is? How can we change it? I never accepted the response, it is what it is. I never accepted that. I always believed that there was a way to change anything I wanted to change. The second way is meditation. Or, of course, hemisync. By going into deep meditative states, by staying still with ourselves, we're able to receive messages, symbols, meaning from the divine source and get that knowledge. And last but by no means least, psychedelics. These are the 3 ways. Psychedelics, listen, if you want to go take a load of shrooms, make sure that you set yourself the intention of finding out what your purpose is. If you don't do that, you'll get a different message, which is fine. Just be ready for a different message, okay? And remember, you can only find your purpose, you can only find out what that purpose is once you've actually dealt with those lower centres. Or at least you've taken aim at awakening. Something else I want to mention about purpose, just while I've got you on, is that a lot of people believe that you can't pursue purpose and make money. Now, I believe that view is completely wrong. In fact, once you begin to ascend to higher levels of consciousness, when you're not dealing with the day-to-day, when you pursue your purpose, money flows to you naturally. Ideas around how you can monetize or how you can create something around that purpose will come to you. Help will come to you. But you have to take aim at waking up. If you don't wake up, you're going to be stuck in the same patterns you were in before. There is no change, there is no transformation in your life without first taking aim at yourself. Personal transformation. That's where it starts. You must change your inner before the outer world changes. That's the way it works. So it's always worked. Now, when you find your purpose, the next part of this is to find others that are also aligned with that. And this is where you can begin to use our old favourite, organised action. Listen, you don't have to get away from the world in order to live a fulfilling, aligned, awakened life. You don't need to do that. There's so many other people also on this same journey, also on this same path. They're going about their lives, also taking organised action. They're trying the hardest to change the world or change themselves or change their community for the better. Now, what is it when we all work together and take organised action? What's it called? It's the old favourite word, politics. That's all it is. It's when we recognise the only way to get what we want in the world is through working together in harmony to better the world and better ourselves. It's not about being alone, not about consuming, not about rejecting those 4 areas of control or power that I mentioned to you before. It's not about that. It's about recognizing what these are, that they're energy, that they're systems, whether they can be used for good or for ill, and that's it. Politics is just the science of working together as a cohesive, harmonic whole. That is all it is. And you don't have to stop doing that just because you want to live a life of purpose. In fact, you typically start doing that when you start leading a life of purpose. You just have to be careful. You just have to be careful with what you associate with and who you associate with. All right? Because when you're living a life of purpose with others, then you create bonds. Those bonds are created together in the pursuit of something more than our singular parts. That's what it means to organise. You bring your individual purpose together with others for the harmonious working. And if you don't have something to work on, you must focus on what that is. You must find it. The human being is designed to search for goals, to create and to build, if you're a man. And it is to nurture and protect if you're a woman. Ignore that at your peril. Remember, we're physical beings. We have physical desires and physical needs. They have to be tended to. My best advice that I can give you on finding purpose is once you've found your purpose, find a community and actively engage within it. And it will lead you to even greater development of the centres or the circuits, whatever you want to call it. And it will challenge you to grow in ways you haven't even realised. That is the importance of purpose. Last, but by no means least, is to be conscious. We've done awake, we've done purpose, and it's time for conscious. It's connecting to your higher self. To be truly conscious is to reject the game, the ladder that we talked about before. To reject this. To reject this system of control. That is what it means to be conscious. But it's not to reject the world. The world is not the system, and the system is not the world. You can reject the system and the players, but not humanity. When you're conscious, you have the power to not only create and author your life, but also your destiny, your personality, your reactions. Nothing is off the table, and everything can be changed, adjusted, or adapted to suit your needs. And I know that if I wanted to play the game, I could do it, because I understand it. If I wanted to become anything, I can become it. All I have to do is think it, work on myself, and slowly I will transform using my conscious effort. This is what it means to harness your imagination. That oh so important word that I will keep coming back to again and again and again. To harness this power of your imagination. If you can think of it, you can become it. Reality really is whatever you want it to be. Which is why, rather than going off and shunning the world, you must create your own systems, your own ways of measuring success and happiness. I have created a new game for myself. And my measurements, the thing that I measure every single day is how much have I helped others today? How much time have I spent in pursuit of my purpose today? Where have I been emotionally today? How long have I been awake for today? And the reason why those are my measurements is because I think I've mentioned this at the very beginning of this. I'm 27, and anything that I've put my mind to, I have succeeded. I've done. Whether it is making 100 grand a month in what we call revenue in my business, whether it is getting into politics in the UK. I worked with the education secretary in the UK by the time I was 21. I own my own home. Everything. Everything that I've wanted externally from me, I have achieved. And honestly, it wasn't even really that hard. And when there is barely any challenge in the world, you must look elsewhere for challenge. And what challenges me is self-growth. What challenges me is self-understanding. What challenges me is getting a grip or a feel of what is hard to grip or feel, the ethereal. What challenges me is understanding how the world works and how the world functions. That is what challenges me. And I have had the wool lifted over my eyes. In fact, there's a famous analogy which is called Plato's cave. Plato's cave is where you've got, say you're in a cave, and you've got lots of people in this cave. Okay, lots of people in this cave. And all these people can see is shadows on the wall. And they're locked. They're locked in this cave, okay? They've got chains on them and stuff. This is all they can see. This is all they can experience is these chains on the wall, okay? And one day, someone finally escapes. And when they escape, they're blinded. They're blinded by light. They're blinded by the light of the world. And for the first time, they see grass, they see clouds, they see creatures, they see trees, they see everything. But first, they're blinded. They can't see anything. It takes them time to adjust. But they see. For the first time, they see. And once they become giddy, drunk on this world, they finally see enlightenment. They finally get it. They return. They go back into the cave to try and bring others with them. But the challenge is, how do you describe a bird to people who've got no idea about what a bird is? How can you describe the sun to people who've never seen sunlight? How can you describe it? You can't. It's very difficult. So what will these people do? They'll kill you. They will kill you for interfering with their shadow. This project has been me making a choice. My choice is I have shown you how I think the world works. It must be around 8 hours, 9 hours worth of videos by now. How I believe the world functions. Irrespective of what other people think, this is what I think. Hopefully it's helped some people. Maybe no one will see it. Who knows? I don't know. But I need to do something. Because I've spent time here and I wanted to come back down and share with people here. And that's what it means to be conscious, to choose. And this 8 hours, 9 hours, how long it is, has been about your choice. Your choice, right now, in this moment. And that choice is between 3 options. And both of these options lead to exactly the same place. The game, the system. Whether you acknowledge that you will be an eternal slave and pursue pleasure, or whether you will risk it all and play the game, it doesn't matter to me. As long as you make the choice. As long as you choose. Or maybe you'll reject the game completely. Like what I've done. And once you reject the game, you become bored. Once you play it long enough, you get bored. And you could just change it and make a new one. I've walked away from my political career. My traditional political career, anyway. I've walked away from 2 successful businesses, romantic relationships, friendships. I've walked away from them all, time and again, because they no longer serve me. Because when I got these things, I realised it wasn't what I actually wanted. It didn't fulfill me in the way I thought it would, because only one thing can do that. Only one thing can fulfill you forever. And that is a connection to the divine. Let me tell you right now, if you take the blue pill, the difficulty in your life will be a life of powerlessness. You will be at the behest of others for your entire life. The red pill, you'll be fighting your entire life. You'll be aware of the choice that you made. You will alter your life. But the sacrifice will be the most damning of all. You will sacrifice your soul. You will sacrifice yourself in the pursuit of the material. Both of these are material choices. Or you take the white pill. A connection to the divine. A connection to your higher self. That is the choice I've made. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say to you at 27, I've got it all figured out. I haven't. This is the truth as I see it now, that I'm documenting for you all to see. Let's be clear. I'm on my own path, my own journey, and my thoughts and opinions, they're probably going to change and develop, and hopefully they will. Look, for example, I mentioned you shouldn't reject money, you shouldn't reject religion, you shouldn't reject education or information or imagination. You shouldn't reject these things just because they control people. It's just like electricity. In the right hands, they can do wonderful things. Which is why I'm interested in finance at the minute. I really want to explore and understand finance and how it works. Stocks, shares, trading, betting, all kinds of financial instruments. Why? Because I can feel that emotionally these areas trigger something in me. I've often said, if ever I enter a casino, I wouldn't leave it again. I've often said, if ever I enter a casino, I wouldn't leave it again. That some part of me would remain there. You know, in 2017, I made over £10,000 trading crypto. But my brain was just all over the place. I had no emotional detachment. And so I lost nearly all of it as quickly as I made it. And that tells me that I have work to do in that area. So guess what? At some point, I'll probably start exploring it and understanding how I react to these things and go even deeper with that relationship to myself. There is no destination. There is no ending. The point of it is the journey. That is the point. And the journey never ends. You never finish. You never make it. But you're always full. You're always fulfilled. And as long as you remain true to yourself and remain true to the connection you've made within yourself, then this is the alternative. This is the way of the awakened. So, if you want a life of being an outcast, of deep inner work and introspection, a life of seeing through the world and other people seeing you as strange, for being able to see and witness what's going on, then choose the white pill. But at least choose. At least choose.